let's go ahead and start tonight. And would you like to open us in prayer, Betsy? And then I have some questions.
Sure. Well, Lord, we're just thankful that you're always with us and that you love us in our humanity and in our weaknesses. And Father, we just thank you for what you're doing in the world today, drawing more and more people to yourself. Lord, help us to fully mature so that we can be all you created us to be. And be with me, Lord, tonight. Help me to answer clearly and to express your heart in what we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Betsy. So tonight we are in our last of a series of 5 question and answers as we've been covering human developmental maturity. And each month we've featured one, and it's been so exciting and interesting to hear the questions and to hear your answers, Betsy. And tonight we're going to tackle elder. And I just want to read something as a way of introduction here of why I'm so excited about this one. Is from the newsletter we put out. It says, trust is built by elders because they live transparent lives and they no longer hide what they feel, so they can be cool. They are real in ways that they haven't been since they were children. That is really appealing. So I can't wait to hear more about the elder stage. I'm excited about that. But before we start that, would you just give a brief recap, thinking back to many months ago when we started with infant and each stage, and maybe just cover what were the tasks, what is the primary goal in each stage before we jump into elder?
Okay. Well, being an older person, that's probably more than my memory can handle, but I can give a brief summary. So we start as infants, obviously. That's from 0 to 4. And the primary task of infants is to learn to receive. And many of us sadly didn't learn how to do that. And that includes knowing how to regulate all of our emotions. And we learn how to regulate our emotions when we're comforted, when we're in distress. And when we're comforted, we feel calm again. We feel peace. We feel shalom. And over time, with repeated comforting and soothing, we will develop the neural wiring that goes from places in our brain that are in pain up to the front prefrontal cortex, which is where we want to live. So that's the infant. And the child then from age 4 to puberty, basically, they are learning to take care of themselves. That's their primary task. And that's a lot of really important things like taming your cravings, knowing what's satisfying, learning how to do hard things, learning how to explain yourself to people who don't understand you or get you. So that's all childhood. And of course, these are big blocks of time. So there's a big difference between a newborn and a 4-year-old. And there's a big difference between a 4-year-old and a 12 or 13-year-old. And then starting at puberty, we move into the adult stage. And this has been acknowledged for centuries. Think about the Jewish bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, where you are acknowledging that somebody now, their brain now is fully on board, left hemisphere and right hemisphere. They're able for the first time to think objectively, which means they start questioning their parents. But all this is normal. And in the adult stage, you learn then to care for someone who's at your same level. And you learn how to negotiate really well. And that means you don't just want what you want. You want to give to the other person as well. But you don't have at that point a huge amount of capacity. You can't really deal with someone who's super needy or someone who's much younger than you. You really are doing really well with, I would call, like equal relationships. And so you are learning at that point to take care or to be in relationship with someone who's about at your same maturity level. And then of course, and I wanted to add one thing to the adult stage. You start ideally with the same sex, forming like a close friendship, in my case with another girlfriend. And then as you mature, you're able to handle then the opposite sex, which is a lot more complicated, as we all know, because there are real differences between the way we see life and the way we operate between male and female. So then we have children and we move into the parent stage. Ready or not, you move into the parent stage. And of course, the parent stage is much harder if you have not completed all the needs and tasks of infancy, childhood, and adult. So if you have never learned how to say regulate your fear or anger, and now you become a parent, ooh, it gets to be really hard, because now you don't only have just yourself and maybe your spouse, but now you've got someone who's much more vulnerable. And so at the parent stage, you're having to learn how to give sacrificially without expecting anything in return. The adult stage, there's kind of reciprocity, give and take. We get to go see the kind of movie I like tonight, but next weekend we'll see the one you like, or we're going to eat Chinese tonight, but I know you like barbecue, so we'll have barbecue the next time. But now you're a parent and you have to learn how to give sacrificially, but you still have all the previous ones. Hopefully you've learned to receive and you've learned to take care of yourself. So even though you might have to defer taking care of yourself for a short time, in order to change the baby and feed them and get them back to bed, you have to defer your needs for sleep. You don't defer it permanently. You have enough creativity and capacity to defer, but then, to take steps to make sure that your needs are being met as well. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. And then we're now at the elder stage. So the elder stage means the task of parenting is done. And when is the task of parenting done? It is done when our children reach adult maturity. They might still be in the home, but they are becoming increasingly independent people who are very occupied with their peer world. That's a need of adults, to have a peer community. And so as they're moving sort of away from us psychologically and emotionally, we have then capacity that we were sacrificially giving to our children, and we start to become elders, or at least have the potential to become elders, because our children now don't need as much from us. It doesn't mean they don't need anything, but it just means compared to before they became adults, it's a very different feel to life. So you have XX lives to give. And in the ideal world, as you move into elder maturity, you begin to reach out beyond your own family to the community. And elders basically parent communities. And they're always on the lookout for the person who is looking left out, is looking sad, is in need of some way. And you're reaching out to the people who might overwhelm someone who doesn't have that full capacity and maturity of an elder. So that's my summary.
That was excellent. You did a great job taking me back and thinking about all of the different stages, and then introducing our one for tonight, which is the elder maturity level. So Betsy, when you were talking and you mentioned elder, and you said our youngest child is in the adult stage and we're able to move into, so do we automatically move into the elder maturity stage? Do we automatically function out of that? Is there more to it than that?
No, we definitely don't move into it automatically. So, one of the first criteria for even beginning to be an elder is that you have to have your children be in that adult stage. So you're talking about an older person. And so you have the potential to become elder, to achieve elder maturity once you're older, but you can't actually do it earlier in life. But I think what really hinders us, sadly, in our culture is that most people still are dealing with deficits from the infant, child, and adult stage. And so that really keeps them from being able to be fully elders. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not do some things that require elder skills or look like elder skills, but it's not a consistent level of elder maturity. If you're still, say, for example, like me, I'm the right age, but I'm still working on processing shame, which is an infant task. And so I might look like an elder some of the time, but when I am struggling with shame, then I look like an infant. So I think that's what really blocks us. And the sad thing is that very few people understand maturity. Very few people are fully maturing or even engaged in working on it. We're always recommending that you start at the bottom start with infant and make sure you have all of that. And if you don't have it, then don't pick the hardest one on the list. Pick one that you have some of the time, and then you really focus on working on it, spending time with people who are good maybe in that area. Maybe you're good in an area where they're not, and share life together, ask help of the Lord, start becoming more and more aware of where you fail. And I find that it is doable. I mean, I've been working on this now probably for about 8 years, and I think that's right. I think we learned all of this about 8 or 10 years ago. So you do start to see improvement, and it does sort of snowball. You know, once you get one deficit, you've recovered from one deficit, then you have more capacity then to tackle one that's a little bit harder, and it kind of goes from there. And for me, actually, working on shame, it's supposed to be the hardest of the negative emotions, and I just started working on it probably about 9 months ago, and I'm already finding it a lot easier for me just to recognize what I'm feeling is shame. It used to be like, I can't even admit I feel this because it's so painful. And now it almost feels like just acknowledging that that's what I'm feeling and owning it. Yeah, that almost seems to subdue it in some sense. And of course, spending time with the Lord, seeing just how deeply he loves us despite our humanity and our weaknesses is so healing, and it really does take away our shame. So we need elders, and I really feel at HCI we want to cast vision that if you're of the right age to be an elder, you know, join us in this journey, and commit to the Lord to do all that you're able to do to reach that elder maturity, because it's desperately needed. I had a little story that popped into my mind tonight at dinner when I was eating with Sam of a time when I behaved like an elder. Now, once again, don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming to be at elder maturity, but there was a time when we were going on a hike with one of my children's classes. The teacher was very athletic. She was constantly getting the kids outdoors. We were hiking in Harper's Ferry, and if some of you have been there, there's an incredibly high rock on the other side of the river from the town, and you can actually hike way up high and then drop down to this rock, and you're way up high, hundreds of feet high, and you can look out over everything. It's a gorgeous view of the town. And so this teacher would often ask me to go because I like to hike. And on this particular day, one of the boys, he was a little chubby, but a sweet boy, and he was just having a really hard time, and he fell way behind, and he started saying, I can't make it. And I just stuck with him and gently encouraged him that he can do it, and didn't say a whole lot, but just didn't leave him. The rest of the class and the teacher were completely out of sight, and he kept going, and he made it to the top, and then came down to the rock where the view was, and the other kids were all sitting there eating their lunches. It was so sweet because when he made it over the top, the other kids all started to cheer. Kind of makes me tear up when I think about it. And then he had this sense of, I did it, that was so powerful and wonderful. So that's the kind of thing that elders do. They're looking for the stray person, the person who's struggling, and they come alongside them, and without being pushy or let me fix you or let me tell you how to do this, they're just with them, and they're just encouraging.
That is a beautiful picture of what we're aiming for with elder maturity and those kind of tasks. Wow, thank you. So one of the indicators in our survey that was in the newsletter said, I endeavor to parent those in my community in need of help, guidance, and a friendship. Can you explain just a little bit more about what that looks like? Because when I read parent, I think, well, how can I do that without crossing other people's boundaries? And so would you tell a little bit more about what you mean by parenting our community?
Yeah, I think you're coming alongside someone who welcomes your help and attention, and you are Yeah, just trying to help fill in the areas where they never got the nurture or parenting that they needed. So a lot of people in life have never, say, learned how to do hard things. So I go back all the time to Jaden, who's now in college, but when started coming to our house, she had a single mom when she was around 2, and I would do things with her like rake leaves or go sledding or cook. She was actually a pretty good little cook, still is, and you just are doing things with them to help them parent. But I can remember we would work a lot on taming cravings, and it would be hard for her sometimes. She'd see something in my cupboard that she wanted, and I would tell her, you can't have that right now, but I would say to her, I'll comfort you. So I would sit down on the kitchen stool and hold her on my lap and comfort her. So it's not too different than the task of parenting. Now, some people, they're not comfortable, you approach them and they don't want that. But some people are eager for help. They will tell you, I don't know what I'm doing, and this isn't going well. And they want someone to come alongside them and help them, maybe just for a season, or maybe for more, maybe for longer.
Thank you. That helps clarify that. And I know something we've talked about is the relationship between the church and elder maturity. And sometimes that the church pushes people to function as elders when they're not quite ready. Could you speak a little more about that?
Yeah, that's kind of a big heartache of mine, that when you're in the parent stage and you have children at home, and children, parenting children takes a lot. I mean, it's a big job to really help them through all the needs and tasks that they have as infants and children, so that they get a good start in life. It's really quite demanding. And so it's really true that churches are always looking for volunteers. And some people, and I was this way myself, it's easier for them to focus outside their own family than to give their own family the attention and time that they needed. And so I remember with me and Sam, we were constantly being asked to do things to where we were out almost every night of the week. And I finally realized at one point that I was exhausted, and the kids would be like, oh, not again. And I thought, I don't think we're helping them to grow up loving Jesus by doing this. So we made an agreement to only be out one night a week. But what I find, and I've been on staff at a church, and what I find is I would sometimes say to the leadership, don't ask so and so, they've got a young family and their focus should be on their family. And they would be like, oh, but they're really good at this, or they're really they're eager to help. And I never was able, to be honest, to convince anyone to not do that. But there are stages to life. And when you're in that parent stage, I'm not trying to say you can't ever go to the gym or do things, without all the kids in tow. But there are certain jobs in ministry that are quite demanding. And I think we don't want to get so occupied with that our own children, their needs aren't met. It's a tragedy, really, in the church. For many years, missionaries would go overseas, and their children then were separated from the families and sent to schools, boarding schools, where often the children were abused. And it's just a really, really sad legacy in the church. So I think we need to always be careful as leaders about who we're asking for help. And not just with maturity, but even like if we know that someone is leading a lot of other groups, we don't want to then ask them to do one more thing simply because they're the kind of person that we know will say yes. We want to invite them, if they're looking tired and worn, to take a break and tell them, you don't have to do this. I recently did this with one of our leaders. I told her, she said, I feel like I want to pay back what I'm receiving. And I said, you don't owe us anything. You look to me like you need a rest, you need a break. So just take a break.
That's so encouraging to just hear permission to be about the family, the place where you're at in life, and to not have to be pushed ahead, to at least consider that this is where I need to be, and to be given permission to just have a rest. So that seems like that's one of those good maybe parenting skills that you're doing in a community sense, is that you're recognizing where someone's at. So we have another question, shifting a little bit from church to the idea of organizations. And are you aware of any organizations that are considering maturity levels before giving people platforms to speak, share opinions about leaders, or lead others? And are there any examples of those creating a culture that assess maturity, process any associated shame about lacking skills, and supports people in developing skills? Is it possible to include being at or approaching elder maturity in a vetting process?
Gosh, wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, that would be wonderful if people did take maturity into account when they're hiring people, because it's certainly important. I mean, to be honest, that's, I'm not in human resources, so I don't really know about other organizations, but I personally am not aware of any organizations that take that into account. I think in general, people are hired based on their experience, their job experience, and their education. And then there's, of course, an interview, and you often look for giftedness or how well they communicate or whether they seem relational. But no, I don't think they do. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how that could be done, because I know the maturity assessments that we use, which were kind of culled together mostly from the life model people, but also from like Peter Scazzero's book on the emotional healthy church, and then some other sources on child development. So those are all self-assessments. You're always assessing yourself. You're not required to share it with anyone else, and you're choosing one deficit to work on. So of course, the kind of person who's going to do a self-assessment like that is definitely someone who's wanting to grow and is wanting to be, open and transparent about their journey. And I think the problem people that you can end up hiring often are people who are trying to hide their weaknesses. They're not going to be open about them. So you often don't know until you're actually in a situation. And it can be that someone will go along smoothly for a long time, and then they'll get triggered and they'll derail, and it will be a bit of a shock for the people who have hired them. So we've tried at HCI, we're a very, very small organization. And so we try very much to get, only hire people that we know fairly well, that we've spent time with, that we've seen, in action, so to speak. But even so, if people do struggle, I mean, for me, maybe the most important thing isn't where they are, but their heart willingness to engage in the process. Because, neither Sam nor I are fully mature. We're just growing toward it. And so I don't think in this day and age you could expect someone to be at elder maturity. And to be honest, let's say elder maturity begins when your children are adults. When your children reach adult maturity can really vary a lot, but that's probably going to be people mostly in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Even nowadays, people go up to 100. And so at the same time that you have a lot of emotional and psychological and even spiritual capacity, if you're like me, your body is slowing down and you don't have the energy you once had. So it seems like many of those people are not going to be the ideal person to head up an organization, but they're great to have as part of the organization, as the person whose office people stop in to process, their upset, or in other words, just really great to have elders on your team, but they may not be the leaders. I don't know if I answered every aspect of that. That question had a lot of aspects. Can you maybe read to me the last question again, or the last part of it?
Is it possible to include being being at or approaching elder maturity in a vetting process. And I think you kind of addressed that with you're not sure how you would do that, at least with the assessments that we use, because they are a self.
Yeah, and let's imagine you have someone who's really healthy and they say, I'm here. This is where I am. Then it's almost like we can't avoid problems in relationships, in all honesty. It's impossible. But what's important is the repair. And I know, like in some of the prayer ministry training I've had, we've talked about what happens if you get triggered during the session. And sometimes you can just say, I need 5 minutes. Can you give me 5 minutes of silence? And you can go to the Lord and try to recover. But let's imagine you can't recover. Better for you to say, I'm afraid this is exceeding my capacity and I need to stop. I may need to get someone with more experience to help you because I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. So it's more to me important about to be honest about where you are than to try to operate at a level that you're not always at. To acknowledge and be aware of when you hit those maturity deficit potholes, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you. And I've seen some hearts loving what you're saying. So it's really resonating. Thank you. And we have another question here is when people are more single now than married, the parenting area seems to need an additional category. Can you comment on this about the long-term singles and single agains?
And are we talking about like single people who don't have children? Because a lot of single people do have children nowadays.
I'm not sure if there's more to that. Perhaps we can have a quick comment from the person who's asking the question and clarify whether they've had children or not.
Okay. All right.
So
if you have children, being a single parent will definitely require, it will pull a lot out of you. And a lot of what causes parents to mature during the parent stage is the continual having to sacrificially give. That is, you'd like to ignore your child, but you can't really. The bond that you have with them, the love that you have with them, makes it hard to ignore. So I think single parents can fully mature as parents, and I think this is one place where elders could really step in, like we did with Jaden's mom, who was a single mom, and I was a single mom for nearly 4 years. So I remember just how incredibly difficult that was and how much I had to give up so many things that I enjoyed in life simply to do what I was doing at the time, which was a little crazy. It was getting my Ph.D. and raising my daughter. But that really became the focus of my life, were just those two things, because there was no spare for anything. And I did have a family from Mississippi come alongside me and help me. And that was just incredible. That was just incredible to have their help. And occasionally friends would help me too. Like if I had the flu and really couldn't take care of my baby. I remember one young couple who'd never been around a baby, fairly newly married, came over and took my daughter away because I was retching and just couldn't take care of her. So I think that's a place where we need elders all the more, because you have so many single parents who are going to need someone to step in, someone to sort of adopt those children as if they were their own grandchildren and love them that same way. So in terms of being single, I think it's a little harder to achieve elder maturity when you're single, because there isn't anything really pulling at you so much to give. But there are some circumstances where I think it can naturally happen. I think one of them clearly is with elderly parents. So I've watched many friends, and I've gone through this myself, as your parents get older and their health begins to fail, especially if they live long lives. There is almost like a parenting aspect you have to take over, except for it's actually harder than with children, because you can't just pick them up and haul them home. You gotta You've got to constantly be asking permission. So I think that taking care of elderly parents, and also I think if you have a friend who's not able to give back, and you choose to be in a healthy, not a codependent, but a healthy relationship with that friend, and to come alongside them and help them sacrificially, knowing they're not going to be able to give back. So that's another way. And it's just really hard. There's just no way around it. As you get to those upper levels of maturity, they're quite difficult, and they typically involve some suffering. But suffering draws us to God and makes us more like Jesus. And he really uses it in our lives. And scripture talks about how Jesus learned from the things he suffered. And so we can learn to suffer well. We can learn how to give without becoming codependent, but to give not out of fear because we're afraid of what someone might think, or because we feel like we have to please them, but to give out of love because we sincerely want to help the person. We see their need and we're giving to them.
Well, that's encouraging. Thank you. And so what happens when we try to function out of being an elder before we're ready? What do we need to be aware of if we're tempted, or if we're being pushed into?
I think, I mean, many things can happen, but the two that jump out at me is, number one, you can burn out because you're trying to do something you don't actually have the capacity to do. So you might think it'd be great for me to help these people, but then it doesn't go so well, or their endless gratitude of, oh, I can't believe you're helping me, wears off, and they become more demanding. And then at that moment, you kind of encounter your deficits that, maybe you don't have really good boundaries because you don't have the capacity. The crazy thing is as you mature and you have more capacity, doing those very same things becomes quite easy. Not that it might not be wearing, or that you have to give sacrificially, but I don't even know how to describe it because I've been watching myself as I've been intentionally focusing on specific deficits and recovering from them. I can see that things that used to be really, really hard for me are not anywhere near as hard as they used to be. I'm able to stay grounded in who I am in the midst of those situations. And if I see myself derailing badly, I know to pull away in order to protect people from me and to go to the Lord with what I'm struggling with. Like maybe I'm struggling to love someone, so I can pull away and do that. But it's not always easy, because even when you have good boundaries, let's say you're trying to rein in somebody who is crossing a lot of boundaries in the group, and you're trying to rein them in, they may not be receptive. They may really rebel at what you're trying to do. And you have to be willing to be misunderstood in those situations, because, you can talk to them, and if they don't see what you're seeing and they're not willing to consider it, then you kind of have to let it go.
Yeah, I could see that. I have another question, and then I'm going to ask you to paint us a picture of what a community full of elder maturity people, or people who are working toward that. Because if I still have young children at home, I'm not at that stage. But as we're working toward that, it would look like. But let me ask you first. I have friends with grandkids, and they transfer their identity of being parents to a new identity of being grandparents. They say, what is wrong with this picture? Is there anything wrong with this picture? And why do we as a culture not reach out to those in the community?
I think it would really depend. I mean, in some cases, there's a need for the grandparents to get really involved with the grandchildren, especially when there's a hard time or there's a new baby. I think I think raising children is really challenging. So I don't want to in any way denigrate people coming alongside their children to help raise grandchildren. But I think what's different for an elder is that they are very aware of who's on the fringes and who's hurting, and they're drawing them in. So that's a little different. Like we have a woman who lives in a assisted living here in Reston, and we typically, now she's in a wheelchair and we're not able to lift her, so she has to come by transport. But she's, the last few Christmases she has come to our house, and she, we're with our children, we're with our grandchildren, but she's also part of what we're doing. And so there's a desire to look for who are the people who are going to be left out, who might spend the holidays alone if we don't reach out to them, and just kind of seamlessly folding them into the family. Maybe you buy them a book or something little that you're going to give them for Christmas to make sure that they feel like they're part of the family, or it could be something big. It's not the cost of the gift. I'm just saying you're doing what you can to include that person in your family. So yeah, that, I think what really distinguishes the elder is that they are reaching beyond their family to the community at large and looking for people who might need a little extra boost. And what does it look like when we don't have elders? It means that a lot of needs go unmet, and a lot of people really struggle, and a lot of times they struggle with God. It's hard to believe that God loves me if the people around me don't love me. What would it look like to have lots of elders? A lot of those needs would be met. And often if it's someone who's very needy, ideally you want to have 3 or 4 elders come alongside with that person, and each one is offering their bit and no one is getting overwhelmed. So I think having a lot of elders, I look at where our culture is right now in the US, I think that could really change things. People are so angry and there's so much contempt. And there's so much immaturity. So I think in general, people would move much more purposefully toward maturity if they had role models and if they had support from people filling in, what they missed earlier in life. Or I should maybe say helping them fill in what they're missed. But it's recovering your maturity has to be done in community. And the community is really, the elders kind of like the glue that holds the community together. Mm-hmm. Jim Wilder had great stories about his father who died, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, but he said his dad would take a walk every day down the street and he knew everybody at every house, and he would stop and chat with them and find out, how's your grandma doing? And did you ever get that motorcycle fixed? And so that's kind of a picture. So that's the person in the neighborhood who knows everyone and kind of gets everyone waving and smiling.
I love that picture.
I think he was over 100 years old, or maybe close to 100 years old when he died. Pretty sweet.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine neighborhoods and churches and communities just full of people who know their other people's names and asking, hey, how did that go the other day? And just really caring, especially the picture you're painting of noticing the marginalized and those who need to be brought in. And that, if that isn't a compelling reason to work on our maturity levels toward elder, I don't know what is. Thinking about with expressing Jesus that way. So Betsy, we have a comment followed by a question. So I'm just going to read the comment and the question. I appreciate your comments about asking parents to serve work at church. When I took a job position at church coordinating spiritual formation for children and families, the policy was that if your child participated, you had to volunteer in children's ministry. And I'll add an amen to that. I've experienced that as well. I very quickly said to the parents, let me be the person you say no to. Then I started getting to know people in the elder stage. in terms of age about the idea of caring for someone else's kids. This seems hard and countercultural in church and ministry settings. I appreciate your example of being an elder to someone in your neighborhood. Have you seen examples, or do you even have a story of someone in a church community who served as an elder?
That's a hard one because we use elder in so many different ways, but elder maturity, someone who served in a church setting. I mean, I think about Joel Brenneman, who started taking in foster kids, and I think she's in her 60s. I don't know, but yeah, she started taking in foster kids and helping them. So it wasn't necessarily in a church setting, but I think it would be wonderful if churches did start to do that. They couldn't be all the care, because I know, like, I can't carry and hoist kids around, but yeah, to have an elder figure in a rocking chair, say in a nursery, holding babies, helping quiet them, that would be wonderful.
Right. So there's a clarification that they meant that someone who cared for others outside their family, not in an official role. So just in, it looks like in the, served by caring for other people. Do you have any stories? And I think you did share the one of Jim Elder's dad.
Well, we definitely did that with Jaden, by having her be part of our life from the age of 2 till junior high age or so, where she got very involved with sports. And they had also moved to a town that was about a 30-minute drive away. And I went out there for a while and picked her up, but then as she got older, that sort of faded. But gosh, I'm probably going to think of examples after this is over. I know in my family of origin, for all of its flaws, my parents were often inviting people who were sort of stray people to join for holidays, or to kind of be part of the family. And I think there are other people who do that. They kind of adopt someone who's lonely and make them part of their family. But I'm not coming up with a great example. I tried, it's kind of sad. I tried to initiate doing something we called Jaden's House. We named it after Jaden, with her and her mom's permission. And the idea was for people in our community, because our community is mostly older and probably most of them could become elders. The idea was to choose a child who was, could use some extra attention, and to adopt them. And just one day a week. We only did Jaden one afternoon a week. That was it. It was just like, I would pick her up from school, and then, or I picked her up from daycare. So I'd pick her up around 4 o'clock, and then she would stay until about 7. So it was just a few hours a week. We had no idea what a difference it could make. Just those few hours a week, doing it week after week. And then she did start going on vacation with us and other things. But my next door neighbor, who recently retired, was a school teacher. I believe she taught 4th grade in Fairfax County. And I ran this idea back by her of Jaden's Place, we were calling it. And the idea was to let us help you connect with the child, and then just start spending time with that kid, with their parents' permission, and just do what we did. A lot of times we were doing yard work, or we would go to the playground a lot when she was little. So I was really disappointed. We kind of launched it and nobody signed up to do it, not a single person. So it felt like people were so busy with their own lives. And my neighbor, who was a teacher, said to me, I have 2 boys right now that I would definitely recommend. They just really need some extra parenting, and their parents, don't seem to know what to do. So yeah, and then I started thinking, well, maybe we need to work more on maturity to get people to the point where, when you're not at a stage, being at the next stage feels impossible and not at all something you'd want to do. But when you get to that stage, then it's something that you actually do want to do. So that's when we started really focusing on maturity. Our thought being, as people became more mature, they'll have more capacity, and they will be then willing. Because I'm sure that if you went to churches and to schools, not as a predator, but let them get to know you a little bit, or go through a teacher and ask, are there some kids who could use some extra time? You would definitely find children out there that are needing some help and support. And with Jaden, I made sure that she was really solid in reading, because kids don't get enough time reading in the classroom to really become a skilled reader. They need someone to do it at home. So I would get books that I loved. I have a whole collection of children's books, and we would do a lot of reading, making sure that she really had that down, just like I did with my own kids.
That's part of that whole passing on those skills and modeling and teaching and coming alongside.
Yeah, in our modern world, or I guess it's our postmodern world now, but in our postmodern world, people are very busy, and they're spending a lot of time in non-relational activities. And for me, I really enjoyed being with Jaden. I mean, we had fun together. I remember taking her sledding for the first time at a golf course nearby, and we had an absolute blast sledding together. So it was fun to go and do things with her, and just to see her joy and delight at different things. It was a lot of fun.
Sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, if anyone has any more questions, I'll give you a second or two if there's anything else you'd like to ask Betsy as we get a little bit closer to the end of our time together. And Betsy, while we're waiting for a second, can you just think about some words of encouragement as we're finishing up this series and on maturity, and maybe someone who's listened to these recordings or attended has thought, wow, I'm not there. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm not worthy? That maybe feeling shame as a result of it. So could you just give us some words of encouragement and speak to that?
Well, the most important thing we all need to know is that we're so deeply and profoundly loved by God. And that's really where it all begins. We are filled with his love, and we receive it, and we become aware of our limits and our humanity, and that does not impact his love for us at all. And that God made us to mature, and it's painful to not be fully mature. It's painful to, fall into those holes and get stuck in painful emotions, or not know how to tame your cravings so that you're doing things that are impacting your health. So this is really a very desirable thing to fully mature. And we're so blessed by the life model people, and people like Alan Shore, people who've been working on human development for decades, that they have actually come up with specific things that you can identify and become aware of and target and work on. And I just want to encourage people to, start at the very bottom, go back to the infant assessment. And once again, I sound like a broken record, but choose something that feels like, yeah, I think this is doable, and just begin to work on it. And maybe form a group of 3 people, and you're going to commit together to work on your deficits and spend time together and kind of report how you're doing, share your stories of where it went well, and share your stories of where you were a complete failure with each other, so that you can kind of laugh at it and get perspective. And I would just say, don't give up, because the world needs mature people. And when you are, as we become more mature, all of this becomes easier and easier, and life becomes more joyful. And not only that, but we become a source of joy to other people. We're able to navigate tricky situations in life-giving ways, and we're able to make a difference in the world around us.
Wow. I definitely want to work on those. That's a great picture to just think about. And to do it in community where we can be who we are, and we're loved. And I know that we at HCI have talk about Emmanuel prayer and how Jesus interacts with us on that. Would you just speak to that just a little bit?
Well, there's nothing like a divine encounter. There really isn't. It's, I like to write, but I sometimes find when I try to describe some of the divine encounters, I run out of words. I don't know how to describe it, but, really our model for relationships is the Trinity, where there is so much love and respect and honor that flows back and forth continually between the three of them. So I forgot where we were. I'm having a senior moment. So remind me again of the question. I was going somewhere.
Just talking about the idea of how we can be with Jesus or remember the Trinity.
Yeah. So I think one thing that has really been a blessing is back in February of 2020, when COVID was starting to rear its ugly head, I felt like the Lord spoke to me about starting Daily Connect. And so we started this thing every day from 2 to 3. We're actually going to do it in the morning, 6:30 to 7:30. This was your idea, Christina. But it's just a daily practice of doing the manual Lexio, sharing your highs and lows with people. It's been extremely life-giving. And I thought we would be doing it for 3 months. I had no idea the pandemic would go on. And I think it's probably a permanent part of our ministry, because the people who attend are getting so much growth from it. So there is somewhere you can come every day but Sunday between 2 and 3. Or in the wee hours of the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And you can experience connecting with the Lord. And I think as we see ourselves the way He sees us, then everything starts to change in a good way. We start seeing that we're forgiven. There's something about being in the presence of God that makes it very easy to forgive other people. You feel so seen, so loved, so understood, so valued. You know that they saw what happened and that they can name it. And so you're able then to let go of your hurts. At least that's been my experience. I had a silent retreat at Meadowlark Park on October 24th, so just a couple of weeks ago, and I actually found myself in a vision sitting there on the bench up above the lake, looking at the beautiful view, where I was in a courtroom, and I was the Lord was having people who had wronged me stand before the court, and He was asking me, "Do you remember what happened?" And I would say yes. And then He would ask me if I forgave the person. And in that environment where I was with the Trinity, it was very easy to forgive. And I have to be honest, I have a hard time with forgiveness. And so I'm just saying, being with the Lord, spending time with Him, letting Him speak into your life, especially any places where you feel hurt or misunderstood, letting Him attune to you and understand you is just invaluable. It really is. And then to not just do it on an occasion, but, to do it every day, or every day that you can, is really, really, it's life-changing. So we've been doing this now I haven't kept track, but it's been about 1.5 years.
Yeah, it's definitely made a difference in my life.
Mine too. And Sam is probably our biggest fan. He's there every single day.
We love that Sam's there every day. He's such a great, welcoming, familiar face.
And I've seen so much growth in him. There's something about the daily practices of spiritual disciplines and spending that time with the Lord every day that really starts to change everything. But you don't have any less value if you're immature. I mean, we're all immature at some level. And it's, I think Jim Wilder uses the analogy of a little tree and then an apple, and the seeds from the apple. I mean, they all have value, and the mature tree, they all have value. But So it really doesn't, God loves us and treasures us, and really we're all his favorite. And that's just so deep. I mean, just drink it in that you are beloved of God, the one who created heaven and earth, the one who is all knowing and all wise. He adores you. You are his precious child. And we want to live out of that place because it takes the sting out of our weaknesses. It really does. And he knew we would be weak. But, you know, when you think about a cute little 2 or 3-year-old in your life, do you love them any less or treasure them any less because they're physically immature and emotionally immature? No, you just treasure them. And that's the way God sees us.
Thank you, Betsy, so much
Mm-hmm.
for sharing with us tonight, the last several months of maturity. And we appreciate so much everyone who came and had their questions and submitted them, and just made our conversation so much deeper and richer as we experienced and talked about these really important things about being healthy community, healthy people, mature people.